Thank you, Achilles. I just want to say that not all 60-year-olds spread disinformation. Just want to make that clear now. But ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good evening. And indeed, a year ago, we were gathered on another beautiful evening to present the first Kofi Annan NextGen Democracy Award to Namibia Kwekwezi, an absolutely inspiring young activist from Zimbabwe. And I think those of you who were there, who were here last year, will remember her eloquence and the sort of sheer force that emanated from her. And as was said by Bia this morning and Achilles right now, on 31st July of this year, together with other activists, Namatai was, as she boarded the internal flight from Harare to Victoria Falls, I believe she was dragged off the plane, detained by unidentified persons, tortured for several hours, and handed over to the police. Then a few hours later, she spent 35 days in detention in very difficult conditions. She was finally released on bail and is awaiting trial. And Namatai's plight is, of course, very close to our heart because we got to know her and be inspired by her work. But it is just one example of the many assaults on democracy that we've seen, very disgruntled cat, the assaults on democracy that we've seen over the last 12 months around the world. And really, these events remind us, of course, that democracy is fragile, very fragile. It has many enemies, even in places where it has long flourished. However, thank you. However, they also show us democracy's resilience. Namatai's spirit is uncowed, I can tell you that much. And this comes as no surprise because, as Kofi Annan said during his Aristotle's address 7 years ago here, and I quote, "Submission to the caprices of other human beings rather than to the law is a source of despair to the human soul." End of quote. And young people today may distrust, as we've heard many times over the last 2 days, they may distrust our political leaders and some of our institutions and the media, but they aspire, like all generations before them, they aspire to freedom and to the opportunity to select representative, effective, accountable, and inclusive governments. And this young generation is demanding its rights and is fighting against discrimination with a determination that few have shown before it. Tonight, we honor one of these extraordinary young people, Omar van Reenen, a civil rights activist from Namibia. As the co-founder of Equal Namibia, Omar has been at the forefront of the LGBTQI+ rights movement, leading initiatives that challenge discriminatory laws while advocating for greater inclusivity and the protection of fundamental rights, freedoms, and democracy. Omar became a powerful force of change, mobilizing youth across Namibia. They played a pivotal role in leading strategic litigation efforts against discriminatory laws and practices and secured important victories such as the end of arbitrary arrest of transgender persons and the protection of the right for same-sex couples to establish a family. Their efforts faced repression and intimidation, and the adoption of anti-LGBTQI+ bills by the Namibian parliament, and yet Omar continues fighting to achieve equal constitutional rights and to hold political parties and the media accountable for their role in perpetuating discrimination. Make no mistake, the rise of autocracy is not limited to judiciary reforms, control of the media, and state capture by governing political parties. It always coincides with increased discrimination and violence against certain groups, in particular members of the LGBTQI+ community, and with the rollback of women's rights. We cannot dissociate the fight for democracy from the fight for all human rights for all. Today, we present this prize to recognize Omar's courage and perseverance, and in the hope that it will inspire many other young people to confront oppression and advocate for democracy and equality. The prize comes with a grant, a very special work of art, and a one-year mentorship. And I really want to thank our partners in this process, the Democracy and Culture Foundation, of course, but also the Club de Madrid, the Atlas Movement, and the Apolitical Foundation, which all participating in the selection process. And we reviewed the names of many extraordinary young people, and I wish we could recognize them all. Some are here at the forum this year. But we had to choose one, and it is now my very great privilege to ask Omar van Reenen to come on stage and receive their prize. Congratulations, Omar. So we owe this very special work of art to Yanni, who also made the Namatai's statuette last year, and I'm really very pleased.
Wow. I think before I start the speech, I just want to say thank you. This is the first time in my life that I'm being recognized, respected, honored, and acknowledged for a big part of who I am. And the moment I got here, there's been so many people that have come up and said, thank you for your work. I'm so happy to meet you. I've read about you. And when you spend most of your life hiding such a big part of who you are because you think it's not going to get you far in life, and then you're in Greece, being acknowledged for standing up for what your country should be, that's very big. So I just want to say thank you. Okay, so dear democracy defenders, we are gathered here this evening in the birthplace of democracy, a system set up with one goal, to bring power to the people. And centuries later, while the people have the power, the system is not perfect, and it's facing pressing onslaughts that continue to test it. Democracy defenders, we are gathered here today because we believe in the promise of democracy and our calling to safeguard it. Allow me to start my remarks by openly stating how profoundly honored I am to stand before you today and accept the Kofi Annan NextGen Democracy Prize. On behalf of my organization, Equal Namibia, and all persons in my country, and all youth across Africa who continue to face legal, social, and political persecution for their gender expression and sexual orientation. The award is an ode to the struggles that we have overcome as the LGBTQ community in Namibia, Africa, and the world. And it should be seen as an indication that our collective efforts are indeed reaching global audiences and have great potential for inspiring a new generation of human rights defenders for all causes and from all walks of life. While I may be the first openly LGBTQ recipient of the award, I'm not the first youth to be inspired by Kofi Annan to be a steward of democracy. You are never too young to lead, and you should never doubt your capacity to triumph where others have not, said the late Kofi Annan. And in this vein, I must, without most certainty, then thank the Kofi Annan and Democracy and Culture Foundation for recognizing the seismic impact that Equal Namibia, its partners, and members of the LGBTQ community have had. It comes at a time when LGBTQ rights are being weaponized through state-sanctioned homophobia at the peril of our country's democratic backsliding. But this award is a validation of the relentless struggle for equality in a country where acceptance is still hard-fought. It signifies not only the recognition of my work, but also the voices of so many in my country who remain unheard. And to the queer elders whose shoulders I stand on, who have spent decades fighting for liberation. So to every young queer African watching here tonight, never doubt that you are deserving of every chance and opportunity to pursue and achieve your dreams and destiny, because we belong. There is nothing un-African about us. In fact, our queer existence is African. We are the essence of African values. These values are of love, community, and humanity, and they will never and can never criminalize love, because love is Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is African, and I am African too. In Africa and across the world, we can understand that the measurement of any society is by looking at how it treats its most vulnerable citizens and marginalized communities. And in Namibia, democracy is being tested to the brink due to the government's state-sanctioned homophobia. And right now, the youth are seeing the democratic backsliding at the hands of anti-LGBTQ bills. And we are asking ourselves, is this democracy or is it a delusion? What juxtaposition is this? You see, my story starts here, at this juxtaposition. I grew up in a post-apartheid Namibia, in a colored household filled with empowered women and a single mother who taught me the values of uplifting communities around me and fighting for what's right. I was inspired by the story of my grandfather, who built the first hotel for colored people in Narwal Walfish Bay, Namibia, which was then under the brutal South African apartheid regime. This hotel became a space of resilience and community, where colored people gathered in a safe space to celebrate our culture, and where the ruling party and anti-apartheid activists held secret meetings to discuss the liberation struggle and the overthrow of the apartheid government. I grew up with my grandfather's legacy being told, and my grandfather's legacy building community and believing in a Namibia free from the shackles of oppression. I also grew up gay in an independent Namibia, a country that kept the sodomy law from the apartheid regime, which would have imprisoned me for 8 years just because of who I love. Is this democracy or is this delusion? You see, my generation is called the born-free generation, those born after apartheid. But how can I be born free when I do not have the right to love freely, to work freely, to access justice, healthcare, housing, marriage equality, gender-affirming care, joint adoption, and the right to found a family freely? That is not born free. How born free am I? The liberators who fought for our independence from apartheid South Africa promised my generation one thing, and that is that in this new Namibia, a Namibia where everyone will be equal under the law, where apartheid-era laws will never see the light of day again. So much so that Namibia's national anthem's lyric states that the liberator's blood waters our freedom. But does the liberator's blood water my queer freedom too? And this is why, for queer youth like myself, defending democracy is not just a choice but a necessity. Because like racial justice was the civil rights issue of my parents' and grandparents' generation, so too is LGBTQ equality becoming the civil rights issue of my generation. The promise of a born-free Namibia, which our liberators fought for, is up to us to safeguard at the ballot box this November. Because equality is on the ballot. Our lives are on the ballot. And queer organizations have been hard at work since the passage of the anti-LGBTQ bill, so much so with Get Out the Vote campaigns and registering campaigns that the Electoral Commission of Namibia has now stated that 65% of eligible voters are youth, and they are fired up and ready to head to the ballot box and save our democracy. Across the world, LGBTQ rights have become the litmus test for the strength of democracy. Look no further than to Namibia, where a resilient civil society are safeguarding democracy. Founded in 2021, Equal Namibia is the nation's youth-led queer movement fighting to end state-sanctioned homophobia. And even though we are just younger than 5 years old, operating on volunteer time, people power, no annual budget, we have been coined by the Namibian Sun, a local newspaper, as the largest civil rights movement since the country's independence. And since 2021, we have spearheaded campaigns that have supported strategic litigation efforts that have enshrined sound precedents in our courts, strengthening our constitutional aspirations for equality. In 2021, the courts have recognized the right to found a family for queer persons. In 2023, the Supreme Court of Namibia recognized the right for same-sex marriages performed abroad to be recognized in the country. And just 3 months ago, in June, during Pride Month, our court has decriminalized the apartheid-era sodomy law, criminalizing same-sex sexual relationships. This is democracy in action, queer democracy at work. This is no delusion. This is the power of democracy, the power of the people when they believe in democracy and fighting for what's right. And fighting for what's right is always worth it. However, the delusion kicked in when the court victories came with a price, which it shouldn't in a democracy. They should come with the respect of the rule of law. The backlash was swift, and homophobic rhetoric surged among members of parliament, those elected to protect the constitution and serve the people. These attacks on queer Namibians increased with 6 LGBTQ murders in less than 6 months. Our parliament defied the Supreme Court of the land and the very tenet of democracy, which is the rule of law, and passed Namibia's most unconstitutional and draconian bill since independence, the anti-LGBTQ bill, which will nullify a Supreme Court ruling and goes further to criminalize allyship and will imprison activists like myself for 6 years just because of who we love. The bill isn't just a piece of legislation. It's a weapon aimed at our very existence. Born free, democracy or delusion? We have submitted a petition with almost 15,000 signatures calling on the President to veto the bill, the largest such petition in support of LGBTQ rights. The President has yet to veto or assent the bill. And in this vacuum, I ask how many more queer lives need to be lost because of the incitement of violence from elected representatives. Am I next? How many more? Namibia is a darling of democracy in the region, a child of the international community, a state founded by the UN. But we are following in the footsteps of Uganda, Ghana, and Nigeria, who are relegating LGBTQ Africans as second-class citizens. Democracy in Africa is under siege when elected officials choose to ignore the highest court of the lands and the tenets of democracy. This isn't just about LGBTQ rights, it's about the integrity of our democracy. And it would be unbecoming of me to receive this award as a queer African by not recognizing that the namesake of the award is Kofi Annan, who comes from Ghana, where the queer community are resilient and are taking a hold of their democracy to safeguard their rights. So, if democracy means anything, it must mean freedom for all. Freedom to love, live, exist without fear. So is democracy real or a delusion? And are we willing to let bigotry and hate dictate the lives of our citizens? In light of this, we also pay great honor to the legal fraternity and judicial system in Namibia for upholding their independence and for making rulings without fear or favor. Because I stand here before you with one hope that liberation will ring, and that is because of an independent court and a strong constitution. Namibia is also a nation that has endured 200 years of brutal colonialism, the first genocide of the 20th century by Germany during the Herero-Nama genocide. So we are keenly aware of the horrors of discrimination and the struggles that come about with imperialism. Moreover, we recognize that our fight is intertwined with that of the Palestinian people, whose quest for self-determination is echoed in our own histories of colonialism and struggle. And here I must admit that for queer youth like myself, democracy is becoming a delusion when genocide is being perpetrated by states that brandish themselves as darlings of democracy. It's an atrocity to see democracy being weaponized in the name of self-defense to deny Palestinians the right to statehood and self-determination. Where is democracy to save Palestinian children? Where is democracy to ensure ethnic cleansing and genocide does not exist? Queer liberation is intrinsically tied to Palestinian liberation, because if democracy works for LGBTQ persons, it should work for Palestinian people too, or is it merely just a delusion? I stand here before you aware that generations of queer and human rights activists and their allies have come to shape the winds of and the efforts that we see today. The sad and traumatizing truth about being queer in Africa and Namibia is that we don't all make it out alive. We don't. Countless queer people continue to be languished in African jails, brutally and senselessly having their lives cut short by homicide. And I stand on the shoulders of many nameless and faceless queer African giants, many of whom never got to live openly and freely due to fear of actual repression. So in accepting this award, I want to honor and invoke remarkable individuals of African descent who embody resilience and courage to face homophobia, a legacy of colonialism. Their lives remind us that queer Africans have always existed, challenging stereotypes and inspiring others. Their stories highlight the ongoing struggle for human rights and the importance of celebrating our diverse identities. They are Simon Nkoli from South Africa, a key figure in anti-apartheid struggle, late Queen Nzinga Mbande, a formidable leader in Angola, and trans activists like Mercedes van Klute from Namibia, who won the first case against police brutality and arbitrary arrests. Trans women in Namibia continue to be a source of strength and resilience for me because, again, existing as queer and African is a resilience hard fought that trans folks around the globe bear the onslaught of that hate against. And like Namatai, youth are at the forefront of defending democracy. And this year I stand shoulder to shoulder with astounding 2024 NextGen Democracy Prize finalists from across the world who face autocracy to protect democracy because we love our country and we believe in the promise of democracy. We embody Kofi Annan's strong advocacy for democracy, good governance, human rights, and the rule of law. Annan spoke about the importance of inclusive political processes, civil society engagement, and the need to protect minorities. He viewed democracy as a means to empower individuals and promote stability, asserting that it was crucial for addressing global challenges. And this is the same fight we pledge ourselves to continue back home in Namibia and the fellow 9 finalists of this year's award. The monumental decision in Namibia when we repealed the sodomy law aligns us with many of our neighbors in the region. We are not an outlier. The wave of inclusive democracy for queer persons are sweeping the continent and the world. Look at Mauritius, look at Botswana, who have recently decriminalized same-sex sexual relationships. And even though the Namibian government is currently appealing the High Court's ruling to the Supreme Court, the LGBTQ community remains steadfast in our mission to fight for an equal Namibia for us all, because freedom will ring and queer liberation will come to fruition in our lifetime, because democracy is worth that fight. So we must remain vigilant and ensure that the voices of marginalized communities are amplified. The intensifying violence against LGBTQ persons, coupled with regressive legislative measures, reminds us that our fight for equality is far from over. It is imperative that we stand united against the false narratives and systems imposed on us by colonial powers. So in closing, I accept this award not just as a recognition of my efforts, but as a call to action for all of us. Let us honor the legacy of Kofi Annan by standing firm in solidarity with those who are oppressed. Let us strive for a future where every individual can live freely, express their identity without fear, enjoy fundamental rights that are guaranteed, and where 6-year-old Omars can one day dream to stand in the creation of democracy and be recognized for loving their country so much just by being who they are. So I stand before you not just as an activist, but as a testament to resilience. And for many LGBTQ individuals across Africa and the world where discrimination is prevalent, such recognitions as this, it really serves as a beacon of hope and refuels our resilience. Thank you to the Kofi Annan Foundation and the Democracy and Culture Foundation for inspiring a new generation of queer youth ready to defend democracy and not the delusion that injustices make us perceive. This prize gives me a strong platform that I do not and will never take for granted. From pushing for protective legislations to ending state-sanctioned homophobia, the mentorship with a democracy expert and the monetary prize that comes with it will allow us to strategically strengthen our advocacy efforts and build coalitions that advance equality in Namibia for generations to come. This will be accomplished through launching new strategic litigation cases, especially if the anti-LGBTQ bill is signed into law, supporting civil society organizations, championing youth civic engagement, and forming pride alliances at Namibian universities to uplift queer youth, and establishing the first LGBTQ youth and community center in the country. So in closing, I want to honor the names of the 6 people who were brutally murdered in Namibia since the passage of the anti-LGBTQ bill. To pay honor and respect to them, Sexy Fredericks, Queen Uwuseb, Stanley Kluter, Vernon Gavin, Jerome Halgrain, and Gurney Oirab. In your names, equality, freedom, and justice will prevail. And in your names, democracy in Namibia will never be a delusion, and we will feel how it feels to be born free again. Thank you.